Welcome back for another book talk video. It's Suspense Saturday, and I'm talking about a crime-oriented book. It's Sanctuary by William Faulkner. And my goodness, this is a highly criticized work of William Faulkner because of the crime and the extreme violence and horrible things that happen in the novel. I read this book as a part of Faulkner in August 2021, which means I was able to be part of the Voxer group and read comments from so many awesome people. That Voxer group is just packed full of people. Also, on YouTube, we got a lot of big names who've been leaving videos. I've watched videos from Very Literary Carrie, from Alan over at Big Hard Books and Classics, from Brian at Bookish, from Shelley Swearingen, and I need to get caught up on some others. I believe Ross from Scallydandling about the books has some videos about Sanctuary as well, and Noah from Those Who Read It Must Converse. I need to get caught up on whatever he's put out about Sanctuary. It's a lot of people. There are more and more, so I'm throwing my hat into the ring, and I'm joining the Sanctuary discussion crowd here on Booktube. First of all, I do recommend this book with some trigger warnings. It wasn't exactly what I expected, and Shelley Swearingen's video was even to the extreme of saying, don't read this book unless you can handle something in the vein of Quentin Tarantino and that sort of thing. You know, be ready for some extreme violence. I believe she also said Chuck Palahniuk, who, wrote Fight Club and all of that. Because word on the street is William Faulkner, who wrote great literary fiction, wrote this book as a cash grab. That he wanted to scandalize. He wanted people to talk about how violent and different that this book was to help him make money. I know Brian over at Bookish talked about how the book had been revised over time, and that explains some of the strangeness that you might experience and how you might question some situations, because apparently as the book was revised, some things were taken out and changed from the story. Ultimately, I'm glad that I read the book. It does have things that if you have trigger warnings, you might not want to read it. The extreme violence, the rape scenes, the crime that's going on, but it also has some light-hearted moments. Like when two gentlemen show up in a town looking for a hotel and they get confused and they go to the local brothel and ask to stay, as a hotel room, and they don't understand what's actually going on there, which is potentially satire, potentially William Faulkner giving a more lighthearted moment, or could be part of the theme. Brian at Bookish argued he felt the theme is about injustice, about how people are going to try really, really hard to create a sense of justice, and they're just going to fail over and over again. I really enjoyed his discussion of how you can have criminals or gangsters who are different in the city than they are out in the country, because I love the setting conflict of the urban versus the rural. To have city people go out to the country, or country people come back to the city, the contrast of ideas, and that is huge in American literature. You see that in F. Scott Fitzgerald's work with The Great Gatsby, and you see it in a lot of other places as well. Here we have the danger of the country, which is somewhat different, because when you're talking about criminals, smugglers, gangsters, all kinds of stuff, it could be easier for them to get away with those things out in the country. You also have to deal with the kind of idea of the good old boys system, where a lot of places out in the country, the judges and politics and all that, it was really rigged, and the good old boys would just get away with what they wanted to do, and that does not necessarily create a sense of justice. So as you go into the book, just know we've got the extreme crimes going on, we've got characters who get caught up into it, who are victims, but then you start analyzing their character motivation, and even though they are initially victims, the fact that they then seem to be caught up in the crimes can be somewhat morally, ethically confusing looking at the characters. But I would argue that they're still victims, they're just in a very difficult situation trying to figure out how to respond to it. And that happens to a lot of people in real life as well when they end up in those environments. They get swept up into it, and it's hard to escape. So, ask yourself, if you were drugged, kidnapped, if you were a victim of extreme violence and you were just trying to escape that situation, is it possible you might do some things that you shouldn't do? Some morally questionable things just to try to escape and survive? It's that kind of story. So it is interesting. I think it reflects the reality from the United States, from a time period of how people were struggling and trying to survive. So I do think William Faulkner captured something real and, to me, very literary, even though it comes across as a kind of violent, you might argue, somewhat pulpy noir crime sort of story. Ultimately, the word that people really use, though, is gothic. They call it a gothic story because it does have those scary elements, sort of a psychological thriller pace at times. If you think you can stomach those kind of situations and you're willing to wade through it, then I would recommend that you read Sanctuary by William Faulkner. I'm not going to go to the extreme that Shelley Swearingen did in her video and caution you really shouldn't read it unless you're a fan of Quentin Tarantino's movies and Chuck Palahniuk's books, but be mindful of that sort of thing. That's it for today's book talk. Every day is a good day for book talk. You know, the fact that I put this on a Suspense Saturday and not on Fiction Friday, I think does speak a lot to that. Peace.